right, well, I'm not gonna give you a lengthy one because I continue forwarding you, and I know you receive, I think Jessica Babris, is a weekly now with WASDA's legislative update. So, I participated, once again in ESD 113's weekly lobbyist report this morning at 7:30, and so I'm gonna give you the highlights of that. He was asked where we're at with the K-3 class size compliance legislation, and he said that based on legislative conversations to date, he called that a 50-50. We could see that happen, that may not make it, but right now it looks like it's a bargaining chip in the larger context of budgets, the budget packages. We asked about levy restoration, levy reform, and he said that the good news is that both chambers have that in their budget. The challenge is they don't agree on how to fund it, and there's current disagreement on whether or not there should be restrictions on any new enrichment levy money. And that's making the news here recently too. So if you go to the Seattle Times, you'll see some news stories about that, and I'm sure the daily e-clippings will include that here soon. Special ed, still likely that school districts will see some relief in special ed funding, but nowhere near the $400 million shortfall that has been projected several times to cover the gap. So that's a wait and see, but likely. School safety funding, also likely that not only for facilities, but some funding for, Rita, you asked about mental health support. It sounds like some of that's in some of the initiatives, but they haven't agreed yet on a consensus package.
What about the SROs? Could they be in that?
They could be in that. What he told us is there could be some flexibility, which we would hope, in funding. So if you're a very small district or you're a big district like Seattle, you've got options on how to allocate that money. You heard Tim talk about lobbying folks to finish on time. So I asked this morning, will they finish on time? What's the read on that? And he said, it depends who you talk to. Some legislators are clearly indicating that they're far enough apart where at least one special session, even if it's short, might be likely, and others are saying, no, we're not that far apart. There's no reason we can't get this done. And I guess I fall in that camp in terms of if April 28th is the scheduled deadline, there is plenty of time to resolve the differences. I just hope they get to it. And so I asked about next week and what lobbying leverage and strategies could be considered. He said it'll be a challenging week because he described it as a rolling floor week, meaning legislators will be on the floor considering a variety of things, which means they're harder to get to. And so he encouraged emails this next week as the most effective way because he said you might be disappointed to hear this, but not all legislators pay close attention to floor discussions. Instead, they're on their computers. And so if you send an email, they're more likely maybe to read it when they're on the floor. And he's been doing this for many years, so that might be a strategic tip for you. Beyond that, you know, we continue to share the Tumwater School Board Legislative Priorities document. I appreciate the board taking time to do that. We had several districts in the region emulate what you did, especially in districts who've never done that before. And now their board members are talking about that becoming an annual activity for their board, just to become more formal with their legislative action. And I also want to commend this board for being a regular participant in the 22nd District legislative breakfast meetings, where we get FaceTime with our legislators, and for, I know, the individual lobbying that you do because of your activity in the community. So a lot going on there. That's what I have. Unless you have questions, I might be able to answer.
Okay, go ahead, Melissa.
What does it, I know what it means for Steilacoom if we lose our K-3, our K-3 class size reduction. What kind of hit is that to Tumwater if that becomes a requirement?
Well, if it becomes a requirement, some additional positions we'd have to employ. And I think at last count,
2.96.
so 3 million or 3 teachers,
3 teachers.
3 more teachers.
We need to hire 3 more teachers
Right.
to be able to keep that money. Okay. All right. Another question.
Yes.
Is it substitute Senate bill, I wanna say 5023, I think is the number on ethnic studies. Are you familiar with that one? And I don't know if there's any, I don't remember if there was a fiscal note or anything attached to that, but have you?
I don't remember a fiscal note, but I think they tagged it as NTIB, necessary to implement the budget, so it can't just die. So that's one that I know WASA is tracking, because with our focus on equity, that's among several bills, I believe, that are focused on providing additional support to schools with those efforts. And with our newly adopted policy, I think it would fit very nicely, so.
That it?